I want to have a conversation because we've worked with some real high level cyclists at the pro level, at the Grand
Yeah.
Tour level.
Yeah.
We helped get Roman Bardet to second on the podium in 2015 or 16. I can't remember the year.
Yeah. So yeah, about then. Yeah.
Yeah, and so using this approach of what I call establishing foundational fitness by optimizing your fat metabolism. And so what I want to get is have a conversation with you as a medical person. We're both reading the basic research on what's becoming clear and have a cogent conversation on what those unintended consequences of overconsumption of concentrated forms of carbohydrates are, because there needs to be a balance in the sports nutrition across the board, not just endurance sports, but even in team sports. We've in the last 5 years, because of these new formulations of hydrogels, the sodium bicarbonate stuff that can transit the stomach, we're seeing these huge performance gains on what I call hyper high carbohydrate fueling and nutrition. And there needs to be a balance to that the general audience can hear, so that they understand, they're fully informed, right? Because all you're hearing right now is this is what the pros are doing, and the inference is you might want to try it yourself, or this is what the pros do it to win. And we all want to win, whether it's winning our age group, winning against our buddies, or winning in life, and we want to be the best versions of ourselves. But there's no balance of disclaimer of what's going on here.
Right. Yeah. So that's a very good segue into, we just listened to the podcast and Human Performance Outliers with Zach Bitter and David Roach, and they were talking about some of the high carbohydrate fueling strategies they even do in ultras. I know a bit about that, but where I really know it is I see it in the cycling. I still keep in touch with many high-level cycling coaches and the athletes. And it's I think you should start off with it's uncanny how fast the cyclists are going nowadays. I mean, they're breaking records left and right. And, I mean, there's no evidence of foul play, with the doping. There used to be, in the early 2000s and 90s. I mean, we just had Pogacar do the Giro, win the Giro, win the Tour de France. That hasn't been done since Pantani did it in the late 90s, and he was, on EPO, obviously. But it's hard to say. I mean, and then you're just seeing these records, like these guys, just pushing incredible watts for the last hour of a 5-hour race. And so in cycling, point is, and you ask the coaches and they say, oh yeah, the only thing that's really changed is just some more precise training protocols, and we're pushing carbohydrates, at the level of 120 to 140 grams an hour. And you're just, whoa. And I mean, you have to go back. The Italians have been doing that forever. They kind of know, what works, but I think you have to it's so important to put it in the context of why they're doing this and how they're doing this and who this works in. Number one, you got to add, these cyclists are used to pedaling, 3 to 6 hours a day. They ride, in miles per hour, they're riding 22 to 24 mile an hour averages. They're just capable machines of pushing way higher oxidative forms of metabolism than 99% of the people out there. They're all fat adapted. I don't care if you're a professional athlete, especially a cyclist, you are fat adapted by definition. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. They totally efficiently use their fat, especially when they're at sub threshold powers or speeds or heart rates, however you want to do it. You know, so they're just a different machine altogether. But I think what, you know, I've been in the team, you know, I've seen cyclists at a professional level since 2007, 8 kind of thing. And I've seen many of my athletes, you know, who they eat a ton, they're, you know, they're drinking their calories a lot. You know, you can get away with so much when you're racing, and then you see them after their careers. And, you know, I've seen many become obese, in a sense, become insulin resistant or glucose insensitive, and they gain weight, they get pre-diabetes, if not diabetes. Part of it is because they try to think they can live the same way and they can't. I saw several cyclists who this was the result. And back then in 2008, 2010, 2012, they weren't pushing this narrative of 100 and, you know, 20, 30, 40 grams per hour, you know, at all costs. And now they are. And you got to ask, you know, well, what's the long-term consequence? I mean, you know, we know sugar can be bad for anybody, but can it be bad for athletes? You know, and everybody, and I ask all the trainers this, I go, well, what do you think the long-term consequences of that are? And they just all don't care, really. They just care about the here and now. But what, you know, what's going to happen, you know, 2, 5, 10 years after their careers are done, you know, and you know, 100%, if they keep up that kind of sugar consumption, you're going to get disease. You know, we know that from several studies of just intake of sugar, period. You know, intake of sugar leads to insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is a prime mechanism for developing things like inflammation in your joints, chronic disease, atherosclerosis, sclerotic disease, Alzheimer's, dementia. All those things come with, you know, excess sugar consumption. And so, yeah, maybe, so, you know, I get it. So the, you know, the high sugar intakes in the person who's pushing a high enough oxidative metabolism level is going to get a better performance. We've known that for many years. I mean, there's no question of that. And now they're just being more diligent about it. But I fear for the 99% of athletes who aren't in that, say, metabolic fitness or optimized metabolism level, and they're looking at these news reports and training methods going, oh, maybe we should do that too. A master's race, you know, somebody who's going to a master's race that's 50, 60 miles of, you know, it's a 2 to 3 hour race, maybe, you know, and the intensity is nowhere near what you would see at a professional level. And they're going to start fueling like this. That's just a setup for disease. There's no question in my mind that, you know, you're going to see more insulin and diabetes and pre-diabetes in these recreational athletes who try to
mimic what's
copy. Yeah. So, I mean, so that's where I try to, you know, I'm trying to shout from the rooftops, you know, if you're not a professional athlete, you know, doing especially OFM and, you know, another, just basically staying low on the carbs and processed foods and make sure you get the right amino acids and, you know, from nutrition, of course, that's where it's at, you know. So yeah, I think it's a discussion that people need to have, and there's very few people talking about it. And there's no studies on this. Nobody's really looking at this or asking those hard questions